In the next section of the notes, we're going to do this one more time, but in these ones you're going to have to use the quadratic formula because you won't be able to factor like you could above. What is the solution of these two equations? Alright, we are not going to use our graphing calculator. I can teach you that some other time or maybe another video. We're going to try using substitution. Just like the steps above, step 1 is going to start with setting them equal. So I take x squared plus 7x plus 12. I'm going to set that equal to negative x squared minus x plus 12. I'm going to take everything to the left. So I'm going to add x squared, I'm going to add x, and I'm going to subtract 12. So in step 2, I'm going to have it set equal to 0. Here we go. X squared and x squared makes 2x squared when I move it over. 7x and x makes 8x when I add it over. And minus 12 and minus 12 makes 0. So I could just write equals 0. Now guys, you can, if you want to, you can use the quadratic formula here. But you can also remember back to Algebra 1 to simply pull out a GCF of 2x. It's going to make your life a lot easier if you can do that at this step. Pull out a 2x and you get x plus 4. Alright, you have factored it. That would be your step 3. If you can factor, you will factor. The next thing, step 4, is to solve for the x's. Alright, let's take our first item, 2x, and set it equal to 0, and divide by 2, x is 0. Take the second item we have, x plus 4, set it equal to 0. Solve for x, x is negative 4. So you now have your two x values. Step 5, you need to find your y values. To find your y values, you plug in the x's. And I would pick the easier equation. I would say it would be the second one, y equals x squared plus 7x plus 12, because we have more positives to work with. So let's start with our first answer of x equals 0. Let's plug that in. Y equals 0 plus 12 is 12. Therefore, your first answer is 0, 12. And let's plug in our second answer of x equals negative 4. That's y equals, now this one will be a little more difficult, negative 4 squared plus 7 times negative 4 plus 12. Work that out. You got 16 minus 28 plus 12. The next y value will be 0. So this answer will be negative 4, 0. Those are your two solutions. Let's try this idea again. Now, will there always be an answer? No, sometimes they're not going to meet. An example of when you would not have an answer would be, let's say you graphed it, and you have a parabola, and your line never crosses your parabola. Okay? This would be a no solution. When you did the math, okay, let's write that down. When you do the math, you would get something like 4 equals 5, okay? And you would write no solution. Now talk about this one as well. Let's say you have two parabolas. These two parabolas will never meet. Again, this will be a no solution. If you did the math, you would work it out, you take everything to the left, and you might get something like negative 3 equals 1. And you would just write no solution. That was kind of a side note. I remember I had to put that in from last year. So let's continue on. What is the solution of each system of inequalities? Oh, at the top, one other thing is if you have a no solution. One other thing is you might get, write this down, you might get, you ready? Imaginary. Okay? If you get an imaginary answer, that's also a no solution. Over here as well. If you get imaginary. Okay, that's a no solution as well. So now we can keep going. What is the solution to the following? Step 1, set them equal. Negative x squared plus 5 equals x squared minus 4x plus 5. I like to keep my x squareds positive, so I'm going to add x squared here, and I'm going to subtract 5. Step 2, set it equal to 0. 0 equals, when you add the x squareds, you get 2x squared. Minus 4x, when you subtract the 5, you don't have anything left. Step 3. Step 3 is the same as step 3 was over here. Step 3 is to factor if you can. Can you factor this? Absolutely. You can pull out a GCF. So we're going to have 0 equals 2x, because that's the GCF. You're going to have an x minus 2 when you're done. Step 4, solve for x. Take the first item you got, 2x, and set it equal to 0. Take the second item you got and set it equal to 0. Solve here, you get x equals 0. Solve here, you get x equals 2. Step 5 is to solve for y. You solve for y by plugging in your x's. Pick the easier equation. I'm going to pick the second equation. So if I get x equals 0, I'm going to plug that into y equals negative 0 squared plus 5, so I get a 5 out. That answer is going to be 0, 5. Now I'm going to pick my second answer. I got x equals 2. I'm going to plug that in, y equals negative 2 squared, the 2 goes in parentheses, plus 5. Negative 2 squared, well 2 squared is 4, make it negative. Negative 4 plus 5 is 1. So this answer is 2, 1. Those are your two solutions. Let's try part B. Step 1, set them equal. Negative x squared minus 5 equals x squared minus 4x plus 5. I like to keep my x squareds positive, so I'm going to move this side over by adding x squared and adding 5. Step 2, you're going to set it equal to 0. The x squareds make 2x squared when you add it over. You still have minus 4x, and now you have plus 10. Now, if you would like to, at this point in time, you may, I'm going to put a star here, you may divide by 2 to make it easier. If you don't, you're not going to get the wrong answer, okay? But I like to make things easier if I can. So 0 equals x squared minus 2x plus 5. Step 3. Step 3 is where you factor if you can. Can you guys think of anything that breaks down? Any factors of positive 5 that make negative 2? The answer is no way. There's no possibility that you're going to be able to factor that. If you can't factor, you're going to use the quadratic formula. Negative b is a positive 2. Plus or minus the square root of b squared is 4. Minus 4 times a is 1, times c is 5. All over 2 times a. That's 2. Plus or minus the square root of, well, that's like 4 minus 20, or negative 16 over 2. You guys should remember from yesterday that this would be an imaginary answer because your square root is negative. So this has no solution. Remember up here when I said you get an imaginary answer, you simply write no solution. If you really want, you can write never intersect. You can even put those on your graphing calculator and prove it. In the last section, you're going to shade with inequalities. You guys know how to do this. It's just really, do you remember how to graph parabolas, and do you remember if it's broken or solid or shaded above or shaded below? Let's call this inequality number 1 and this one inequality number 2. How do you graph a parabola? Okay, you guys should remember it. Let's do number 1 first. Let's find the vertex, always. This is in standard form, so to find the vertex, I have to do negative b over 2a. That's going to be a positive 9 over 2 times negative 1, b over 2a. Well, 9 divided by negative 2 is negative 4.5. So when you make your xy chart, negative 4.5 goes right here. Now let's do this with number 2 as well. Okay? Number 2, you also must find your vertex. Now you can remember that this is in standard form or vertex form. If you want to do negative b over 2a, there is no b term, so it's 0 over 2 times 1, which is just 0. So when you make your xy chart, 0 goes in the middle of this one. Alright, what's a little smaller than negative 4.5? Negative 5 and negative 6. What's a little bigger? Negative 4 and negative 3. Let's go over to the second equation. What's a little smaller than 0? Negative 1 and negative 2. What's bigger than 0? 1 and 2. Let's plug these in. Alright, let's start with plugging in negative 4.5. Now you're going to plug this into the first equation, so you do a negative 4.5 squared minus 9 times negative 4.5 minus 2. Plug all of that in, and you should get 18.25. Plug in negative 5 the same way, and you should get 18. Plug in negative 6 the same way, you'll get 16. Plug in negative 4 the same way, you'll get 18. Plug in negative 3 the same way, and you'll get 16. Go to the second one, and let's plug in 0. Alright, plugging in 0 into the second one will give us 0 squared minus 2, which should give you negative 2. And technically 0 should be in parentheses. Plug in negative 1 the exact same way, and you'll get a negative 1. Plug in negative 2 the same way, and you'll get a 2. Plug in 1 the same way, and you'll get a negative 1. Plug in 2 the same way, and you'll get a 2. Now we're going to plot our points. Let's plot the more difficult one first. Negative 6, 16. It's way up here. Negative 5, 18. Negative 4.5, 18.25 is like right there. That's one of those little itty bitty dots. I'll zoom in so you can see it. Okay. Negative 418 would be here. And negative 316 is here. Now, I don't personally feel like this is a very good graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my chart, and I'm going to go even lower and even higher. When you plug in negative 2, you'll get 12. And if you do 7, you'll get 12. That's going to give me a prettier graph. Okay, so I'm going to go negative 2, 12. And negative 7, 12. That's really going to help my graph come together. Connect these. Now, do you guys know why I'm connecting them with a broken line? You should answer the reason you're connecting them with a broken line is because it's not equal to. Okay, so you use a broken line. Broken line on that one. Let's plot our other points from this chart. Negative 2, 2 is here. Negative 1 is here. Alright. 0, negative 2 is here. 1, negative 1 is here. 2, 2 is here. This one is also going to be a broken line. That graph doesn't look too bad. Let's keep going all the way up, actually. Broken line. Go all the way up. Okay, so you have your two U-shaped graphs. Now we need to figure out where to shade. The first one was less than, so I'm going to shade below my parabola. So I shaded below my dotted line on the first one. The second one is above, so I'm going to shade above my dotted lines. Do you see the area where the intersection occurs? That area is your final answer. The next one's going to be a little bit easier. Same type of situation. And we need to make sure that for number 1, we find the vertex. And for number 2, we find the vertex. The vertex is negative b over 2a. So that's a positive 4 over 2 times negative 1, because negative b is negative negative 4. That's 4 over negative 2, which is a final answer of negative 2. Make your xy chart. Put negative 2 in the middle and surround it a little lower and a little higher. Let's do the same thing for the second equation, negative b over 2a. There is no b value, so you do 0 over 2 times 1. Well, 0 over anything is 0. Make your xy chart. Put 0 in the middle. Surround it a little lower and a little higher. If you plug in all of these values, plugging in negative 2 will result in getting a 7 in your first equation. Negative 1 will result in a 6, and 0 will result in a 3. Those are going to be reflected. You can try plugging them in to prove it. Plug in 0 into your second equation and get a 3. Plug in 1 and get a 4. Plug in 2 and get a 7. These are going to be reflected. Plug them in to see. Plot your points for the first one. Negative 4, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Negative 3, 6. 6. Negative 2, 7. Negative 1, 6, and 0, 3. You should notice this one's going to be a solid line because it's less than or equal to. So I'm going to connect this parabola using a solid line. And this one is going to be broken because it's just greater than, it's not equal to. Let's plot our points. Negative 2, 7 is the same. Negative 1, 4. 0, 3 is the same. 1, 4. And 2, 7. This one will be a broken line. And now let's figure out. It's going to be below the solid line because of less than, and above the broken line. Where does that intersection happen? Right in this little area. Your homework is on the back of this page. If you want to get a head start for class, I wrote it down. All the odd answers can be found in the back of your book, and I wrote the answers to the evens here.